Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and in this video we are going to make a rye bread chaffle that tastes so much like rye bread, my family thought it was rye bread. But before we start, I need to get a few things out of the way, and I hate lengthy talking bits before videos, but in this case it's kind of necessary. First off, this is dirty keto. I use a small amount of rye flour in this, and I will explain why and what happens in a second. But first, I want to make sure that if you are one of the people that are really into clean, by-the-book keto, this video is probably not for you. Probably hit that back button. That's fine. We'll still be friends. All right, now it's just us. We can talk. The idea for this recipe germinated with some of the videos I'd seen where people are using yeast in various keto breads, but they would activate the yeast with some honey, and they said that that was okay because as the yeast would ferment, it would burn up that honey, essentially leaving no net carbs. So I thought, what would happen if we did this naturally as a sourdough? So I started investigating what happens to rye flour when it goes through a sourdough starter process. And it's kind of interesting. Rye flour has a glycemic index of 78. Until it goes through a starter process, and then it drops down to 52, making it a low glycemic food. In terms of the impact of the net carbs on this recipe that using the rye flour has, I'm going to take you through the math. A serving of dark rye flour is 28 grams, and of that, 19 grams are carbohydrate, 7 grams are fiber, leaving you a net 12 grams of carbs. We're just using a tablespoon of this. So take your 12 net grams, divide by 3, that gives us 4 grams. But we're not using a straight up tablespoon of rye flour, we're using a tablespoon of starter, which is 50% water. So again, divide by 2, that takes us down to 2 net grams of carbs that this adds to our recipe, or 1 net gram per chaffle. Now I put this into Carb Manager and had it calculate the glycemic load, and the glycemic load is 1. That's it. Now for starters, no pun intended, well maybe, you're going to want to make your sourdough starter. And there are probably a lot better videos out there, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly on mine. If you want to learn more about it, just YouTube sourdough starters. I'm using a far smaller quantity than you would see someone use when they're baking, just because I don't need a big batch of sourdough starter. I'm only using 1 tablespoon on any given recipe. We're using just an 8-ounce mason jelly jar right here, and at the risk of stating the obvious, it needs to be clean. To this, we're going to add 1 tablespoon of organic dark rye flour and 1 tablespoon of warm water. We'll give this a mix, then cover loosely. I usually just use a piece of paper towel and gently put the ring over the top. Then let this rest in a relatively warm place. I mean, room temperature is fine. Just don't put it someplace cold. And we'll come back to it tomorrow. It's day 2, and nothing really going on with the starter yet. On day 2, we'll add another tablespoon of dark rye flour and another tablespoon of warm water. I'll mix this together and cover it back up. See you tomorrow. All right, we definitely have some fermentation going on. You can see the bubbles right here. So what we're going to do now is remove 1 tablespoon of the starter and just dump that out into the sink. And then we're going to add another tablespoon of warm water and another tablespoon of flour. Stir that together and cover. So now it's been a week, you've got your starter. Let's get to making some chaffles. Per usual, I will be making my batter in my mini food processor, starting with 1/2 cup of mozzarella, 1 tablespoon of pecan flour, or pecan, I guess, depending on what part of the country you live in. Now, before you start thinking, oh great, here's another ingredient Steve's having me buy, we are going to be using this stuff a lot going forward. There are some really interesting applications that I've got planned for this. So, order some. Then we have 1 tablespoon of pork rind crumbs and 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Pulse this together about 8 times until it looks like breadcrumbs. Then we'll add 1 whole large egg, 1/2 tablespoon of brown mustard, I like Dusseldorf, and 1 tablespoon of our sourdough starter. This is very fragrant. I just took the lid off. You can see it's bubbling. It's been in the fridge, but it still continues to ferment just a little slower. Process until you have a batter. Then we'll sprinkle on 1/4 teaspoon of caraway seeds and give that a couple of quick pulses to incorporate. The yield on this batter is a little bit more than 2 Dash Minis, but if you double the recipe, it's perfect for the Dash No Mess. I didn't double the recipe here, but I'd prefer not to have any wasted leftovers, so we're just going to use the Dash No Mess. Spread the batter around a little bit because this is going to puff up, and this will help ensure that all the cavities get filled up. We are at the 5-minute mark, so let's pop these chaffles out. And onto a cooling rack. I wish I had the ingredients for a Reuben, but I don't, so we're just going to settle with a little ham and Swiss. And I'm all out of avocado mayonnaise, so we're going to use some brown mustard, just a little. Now the Dash No Mess makes some thicker waffles than the Mini, and that means I'm not going to be able to take an especially petite, glamorous bite right here. That is 100% rye bread tasting. From the notes of rye in the middle to the caraway at the end, this is unmistakably rye bread chaffle. So if you enjoyed this video and don't mind the occasional little bit of dirt on your keto, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and if you want to be notified whenever I release a new video, click the bell next to it. Thanks for watching.